When it comes to family addiction, I've had a lot of awful experiences to work through, and oh my God, just a shit ton of negative false beliefs about myself that I had to heal. And for a while, I tried turning to a lot of the mindset gurus out there that many of you may be familiar with, but it didn't work. And so I thought that the problem was me for quite a long time until I started getting trauma therapy and also encountered the concept of toxic positivity. Hello, I'm Madeline Craig. I'm a family addiction educator and life coach, and this is another episode of my video blog, which I call Hope for Families TV. Okay, so what I didn't understand at first is that a lot of the content I was encountering around mindset was actually toxic positivity, brushing legitimate negative emotions that need to be processed under the rug by just thinking positive. You just got to be positive and look on the bright side. You raise your vibration. And that last one just makes me want to hurl sometimes. But in too many of its manifestations, mindset work was just a toxic framework for sweeping legitimate, difficult emotions that need to be processed in order to effectively move forward under the rug. I finally learned that you can't BS your way to a positive mindset. Feelings have to be felt. Emotions have to be processed, or we remain stuck. And the concept of gratitude often gets conflated with this kind of toxic positivity. Just be grateful, look on the bright side. It could be so much worse. And I know for a fact that families struggling with a loved one's substance abuse, this kind of gratitude is not helpful. It's just not. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a legitimate use for gratitude. It just has to be an honest gratitude. So I want to share a story about how this kind of gratitude was so powerful for me. Over a decade ago, I was leaving a very toxic, emotionally and psychologically abusive marriage, and I was so scared. My ex-husband had way, way more money than I did, and he was using it to try and force me to accept his unreasonable demands in the divorce. And I couldn't afford to pay a lawyer for more and more hours of work just trying to fight it all. And I was just terrified that I either had to accept horrible terms or have all my money run dry trying to fight it. In many ways, the process of leaving was harder than staying. I just trusted that things would be much, much better once that process was over, and they were, fortunately. But in the middle of that process, oh my freaking God, I was stressed. I was super stressed in the marriage too, but making a decision to leave was the most stressful of anything. So please don't come at me with why women don't leave. My situation wasn't anywhere near as scary as situations other women face, and it was still pretty freaking scary and incredibly stressful. Now, that said, one of the things I did during that really difficult year that I was going through that divorce was make a gratitude journal. I just took a simple weekly planner, and every evening before I went to bed, I would fill in the space for that day with things to be grateful for. Some days there were these really amazing things that happened. In fact, there were a series of things that actually prevented my ex-husband from being able to force me to meet his unreasonable demands without me having to spend thousands more in legal fees. But the reality was most days I had to dig much, much deeper to find something to be grateful for. Most days I had to dig for some small thing that, had it not happened, I would have had an even more difficult day. So something like, a lot of my entries would be something like, I made a stoplight when I was running late. And other entries were more in the middle, but however impactful they were, I did write them all down. But the difference here was that I was not pretending that things weren't as bad as they were. I wasn't using gratitude as a yes, but I was using gratitude as a yes and. Yes, my divorce was incredibly scary and stressful. And there were all these little moments of respite that I probably wouldn't have noticed if I hadn't been making a point to remember and write them down. So here's what I know that a practice of keeping a gratitude journal did for me. It kept my head from making the stress that I was legitimately going through even bigger than it was. It was already big enough. And it just kept my head in all its fear from blocking out those moments of respite, no matter how small they were. They were just as real. So my gratitude practice just made sure that the fear didn't overtake absolutely everything in my life that year. And that meant that I walked through that awful year in a much more resource state than I would have if I hadn't been engaging in that gratitude journal practice. And this is why I have this love-hate relationship with gratitude. I actually often hesitate to suggest gratitude to the families I work with because I sure as hell don't want to sound like I'm preaching some kind of toxic positivity BS. But gratitude done right, and that is gratitude that isn't being used to try and shove other legitimate feelings under the rug, but rather gratitude that is just trying to keep all the stress and fear from completely taking over everything. That kind of gratitude helped me. And it can help you too to put yourself in a more resource state. And frankly, that's what all my work with families struggling with a loved one's substance abuse is designed to do, to put families in a more resource state so they can respond to the problem more effectively. So I feel like it would also be remiss of me to not talk about how gratitude can help if used right. Because here's the thing. When I train families how to have a positive influence on their loved one's substance abuse, one of the things I talk about is being proactive about managing your fear. Not that the fears aren't legitimate, they are. We all know there are no guarantees. But if you want to be able to have a positive influence on your loved one's substance use, it's essential not to let the fear take over everything. And establishing a gratitude practice is one way to do that. The year of my divorce, there was even another benefit of that gratitude journal. My divorce was final the end of October of that year. So Thanksgiving, a day totally devoted to gratitude, was coming right up. And one of the things I did after the divorce was final was review that gratitude journal. And I noticed all the people who repeatedly showed up in that gratitude journal with their kindnesses large and small. So on Thanksgiving, I sent each one of them a thank you message noting how frequently they showed up in that journal, the impact that had on such a stressful year, and how grateful I was for their presence in my life. In other words, I shared that gratitude, which was just another really beautiful thing to be able to do, and also something that helps keep our legitimate fears from taking over everything, and as such puts us in a more resource state. So some kind of gratitude practice might be something helpful for you to try. Not because it's going to make your problems with your loved one's substance abuse magically fade away. It's not. But if you practice it regularly, it can put you in a more resource state. And that's the whole point of not letting the fear take over everything. Because being in a more resource state will help you address your loved one's substance abuse more effectively. In fact, it's never a bad idea to be in a more resource state, which is why I'm going to return to that gratitude journal practice this month. And as a final note, I'll add that if the idea of a gratitude journal doesn't really resonate with you, you can always just write little notes of gratitude and then collect them in a jar. And then you can review them at the end of the month or the end of the year and reach back out to those that impacted you the most during that time. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about either establishing a gratitude practice or a gratitude practice that you already use. I know we can all learn from each other, so feel free to share that in the comments. Thanks for watching.